spirit of this project is just to try to find some connections between the different topics, thinking about the three major areas that we are addressing in this project: communication, participation, the issues about housing research and pedagogy is also something important for us. Let's try to bring into discussion a little bit these three areas, if possible. Yes.
Conference, there are 4 presentations, and all 4 presentations, colleagues addressed the relevant issue which contribute to the mission of the project, and they are very much related to the concept of the global housing, global dwelling. The first one was related to the issue of energy efficiency, or in the case of low income, and definitely issue of energy efficiency everywhere, especially in those countries which are developing countries, and those let's say transition countries are very much important as a concept related to the sustainability of housing, and also related to the issue of the economic development in different aspects. Then with next one paper will be in Riga, talking about historical about the historical part of the city and the urban renovation there. And it is very much clear that specifically for those less developed countries in the Europe, it is a serious challenge to make preservation of those heritage. Somehow in debate later on with Sandra, it was very much clear that they impose very much restricted regulations in terms of possible investment for the urban renewal of those places there. The next topic has been raised by colleagues from Istanbul, related to the squatter settlement there. What they call there in their own language, it is Gojko, built over the night, and as that huge settlement there is huge city metropolitan area in Istanbul. They do have serious task to deal with that issues, and somehow to make kind of urban renewal, urban regeneration, or even just to build new settlement or place of those who are somewhere in places which might be suit the other purposes. Then the last topic was related to the issue very much relevant for the developed by Adam, developed part of Europe, about the identity and about new places and new investment in housing and new investment in the urban planning.
So, we had 3 sessions this afternoon, again on around notions of sustainability and housing environments. The first session was looking at a scheme in Portugal by the renowned Portuguese architect Roca, who set out an interesting social housing scheme on principles of modular coordination as a way of saving resources and energy. I think the discussion was really interesting afterwards, because we kind of settled on the sort of social aspects of sustainability, which are often forgotten about. You know, we kind of become obsessed with saving energy and saving materials, and you know, and they're vitally important. But we sort of started to discuss what the social implications are. You know, if you do a social housing scheme which is based on a modular system, and that is the drive of the project, where does the social angle come in? What will make people want to stay within that development if it's purely about an exercise in saving materials and energy? Because it's like all these sort of things which are qualitative versus quantitative. It's very easy to measure the number of units that you save, but it's very difficult to measure the sort of social value of sustainability, so it's often forgotten about. So we had an interesting discussion about that and as to its relative merits. What was interesting in both in the discussions after the lectures was a point to do with sort of a reactive culture. There's a notion of progress, some idea of progress in terms of society and technology. There was the middle session was sustain environmental qualities in middle upper class residential areas. As a teacher, I was interested in it was a studio experience. You know, it was about bringing students or the next generation of designers, you know, considering, you know, specific sort of notions about their context. So as a teacher, I was very interested in the fact that there was so much pedagogic energy out of that. You know, how the students were involved as co-creators of knowledge, you know, which I thought was really strong.
Starting with the first paper, Urban Tomography, quite an interesting name, tomography instead of topography, for example, and the idea of having a section through a city and having a number of sections that work in the same way as an MRI section in a medical context, where these sections start helping us mapping particular phenomenon in the urban fabric that will not be evident otherwise if we just relied on plans. Then we move to a second paper which is still at the urban scale but focuses on the large mass housing post-socialist cities in Europe with a number of case studies of housing in different cities or countries, Netherlands, from Amsterdam, Berlin, Zagreb, and Bratislava. What was interesting in this presentation was the similarities of the challenges of these large housing estates which were built in the 60s and where we have about 40 to 50,000 people who are living, and it's the same landscape of high-rise buildings and large open spaces of no man's land in between. And the idea is, what do we do with these buildings? How can we regenerate these large-scale housing estates with a particular focus on the public space? Then we move to the building scale, and the two other papers, which one was to do with intelligent buildings. How do we define intelligent buildings? What is an intelligent building? The answer, as you can guess, is not straightforward, but the presentation was trying to develop an ontology of intelligent building and validating this ontology. And the idea was to look at building control systems that work together rather than just fragments. And the idea is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and how intelligent buildings could actually be self-regulating in a way through the latest technology. And then we moved very much to the scale of a wall and of a cavity or a wall with the project on the performance-based selection of sustainable construction solutions for external walls, and this study was carried out by Veludo Sofia and Rato Vasco in Portugal, in Lisbon. And what is interesting is the idea of trade-off, of looking at two elements. I think there is the environmental impact and then the performance impact. So if the environmental impact, if we want the environmental impact, we have to decide what do we do with the performance. And so,
asking first a general question that I was asking myself: where should innovation be placed in the context of global dwelling, and what did these papers show about innovation? So the first point would be that a global approach to housing introduced in architecture schools, in pedagogy, is about reaching out beyond the circle of architecture specialists. We've already heard this earlier, but I will try to explain in the context of the papers I've seen. And the second point is that global dwelling is not context-free, and I will try to explain this. Of course, it's nothing new here, but I will try to explain how I understand this. questions that arose were about choice of terms, what is our position in terms of teachers, pedagogues, and how can we learn from analyzing our own practice in order to improve it, change it. A challenging issue, that of the aging phenomenon in our current society, and the mission or the role of architects in providing solutions, innovative solutions in relation to this issue. An important role in innovation in terms of programming, by going beyond strict regulations based on efficient models for elderly care, so what is considered to be efficient, and by opening up to ideas that are there in policy, like for example the idea of maintaining as long as possible the elderly in their familiar environments, in their own housing. The third presentation was on a different topic, a different approach, sustainability approach to design, focusing on energy efficiency in relation to cost assessment as a tool for designers and in education. I cannot get into the real content of the presentation because it was very technical. What I can say is, and what arose from this discussion was the importance of understanding the use, so going beyond this technical process of research and of producing a tool, in order to understand the use, the needs of the users for this tool, and in order to bridge gaps between different approaches to sustainability. The final paper was from two authors from Volgograd University in Russia, and it put forward a concept of hybrid space that brought again into discussion the issue of the choice in terms and what this choice of terms means in terms of the approach which is put forward.
But the thing that really came through at the end of the session was that actually the city does belong to us, and that actually as architects and spatial practitioners, because I'm kind of trying to include people in this that are not necessarily architects, but that have that are professionals working in the field of spatial design and urban design and broader, that there's an attitude to shared space and to public space that we need to challenge and to raise the bar and continue with the projects that already exist, of some of examples that we saw that were very interesting. How do we deal with the legacy of modernism, and that there's an awful lot of speculative buildings being constructed, even out the window as we speak, that's not perhaps dealing with challenges and challenging public space and the notion of shared space and shared occupation in a forward-thinking way. So I kind of support the ideas coming through that actually in pedagogy and as teachers we should be maybe embracing learning about policy and spatio-political situations in a bit more detail. We've heard many times today, but we were also talking about the problems of empty housing stock that's been built on spec and that is not wanted, or there's an economic crash even in a microclimate way, and then suddenly there are empty buildings that aren't being used, and that maybe there's another way that we can build a critical mass that is not just about social housing, and that's not just about capitalist profit-driven type of housing, but is there something in the middle, and maybe the variations of co-housing and co-design might be a way forward in in various guises. So it's a complex. It's not just this is the way to do it, of course, but it's going to be based on an understanding of policies that everyday participants can engage in more as well. The second paper, which was Arsen's discussion about user participation in housing regeneration projects, was really interesting as it linked into this idea of really what do you do with a modernist block. A whole load of questions came out from that led to the discussion about the reclaiming the city in a way. Small-scale interventions in habitations then kind of grow. So it seems like there are small invasions that are made that then grow into bigger things.
They show how the students got involved into the making proposals in contact with the neighborhood, with the residents, and the proposals of the students were shown. From a social point of view, vernacular examples from the past, how we can say something about that social interaction of agricultural area that no longer is working as it was, and we can only judge because of the records of the history or because of other kind of textual memories. From my understanding, from what I heard in this session, I mean, participation is not something that can be constrained to a particular moment, to a particular decision-making process. It's something that lasts over time. So we are talking about participation like an ongoing process, like a process of being implicated into something that goes, a transformation that goes over time. It's not just filling in a questionnaire or answering something about in a particular moment. In housing, participation is a process over time. So there was also an idea that we have been listening all the time about something that it seems we acknowledge that is a fact today, which is the split or the division between, on the one hand, the physical environment, the physical structures, and on the other hand, the social structures. If we go back to vernacular architecture, we could say that, following Rappaport, that there was a moment in history where housing, culture, and form were together. They were not segregated. So now we understand that they are separated, and we invoke participation as a tool to connect them again. And I would like just to close now with a more private reflection that comes from all of this listening of today. We have heard several times the city as an ensemble that has certain coherence, is well delimited. I question that such a city exists anymore. And that maybe is the background of the problem. When we are talking about dwelling and social housing, we say the city. Which city? Which city? Because maybe the dimension of global also is something to talk about here. There's no established boundaries. Every city is just a combination, an amalgam of many different fragments from different periods, but also from different kind of political and economical schemes. So what kind of unity we want to bring? Maybe we have to acknowledge once more the fragmentation of the city as a first step, as a reality. And in this case, it's not a problematic thing like the division between physical structure and social structures that we want to reach with the participation. In this case, it's something that, given the dimension of the city, we can say that is as it is. It's fragmented. It's more or less following a little bit the thinking of Ramon in a way. It's like it is, we like it or not, but this is a fragmented city. So.
I wholeheartedly agree with you that community is a very fuzzy concept. What constitutes community nowadays can't really be defined. My very brief comment is that should not be a reason to stop architects, planners, and anybody else involved in housing to consult with whatever community might be.
I find it interesting because my experience is that community is built all the time, and like I work together with Jenny and in Hammarkullen. I find that there is a very vibrant community, but it's on a lower scale. It's like a mosaic of communities that are very vibrant but not not organized as a community, but a lot of different communities. What I find difficult belonging to the professional role and not living in the area is that how do I, if you are representing the community now, how can we find a platform where you become curious on my knowledge and how I am constructing community, and how can I be curious on your knowledge, because it's a lot of knowledge in all of these areas. It's just that we haven't found this. It's how do we construct those intermediate areas where we are curious, because we are all traveling. We all need to find our role in this very communicative and changing situation.
The relationship between the user and the already built space, you see that the result is unpredictable. So when we are talking about communities and groups in real life, it's exactly what you said. It's something really not strict, so it changes all the time. And I think the important thing is that, so even in the participation, I have a question. You make a session and the community says, we want this. The architect gives those imperatives. The result will never be what is expected to be. Life will take the course, and the building also. So I think the most important thing is not to expect, not to lock expectations after the designing process.
In terms of, I think participation doesn't end in just the consultation to the community. Whatever, which type or scale of community it'll be, I think we have to go more on make the community part of the decision making. That always is difficult. But I agree very much with her in terms that the best thing is not to create expectations. It's just we need to find a way in which professional or technicians or civil servant, whatever they are, work with the community, but just try to find a way in which we created a more horizontal level, in which we all have some knowledge, as you say, some information, and we should be open to understand or to share that information, that knowledge, that experience.
I think maybe the issue is how to manage the expectations of the participants. It's about maybe predicting the future in a sense from experience, but also trying to keep the expectation as manageable as possible, because you cannot offer the world and then it backfires. I was going to say something else about co-housing. I think there are lots of lessons in co-housing in the sense that it brings people because they have shared values and beliefs. So even before there is any housing, even before there is nothing, they come together and they start planning their environment in a very team spirit.
This innovation in co-housing is also triggered by the lack of resources, the difficulties. The less the resources are and the more innovative and more people will come together to find new ways of solving problems.
Yeah, well, first I want to thank you for the organization, and it has been 1 year of work also for you. Isaiah, yesterday we had the final meeting of the project. We just commented that maybe we'll have another conference. We'll hopefully we'll have another one in 2 years. Let's see if that happens. So in any case, it has been a very intensive period of work. It's our last meeting now also in the project. Hopefully we'll have chances to meet again. And I would like to thank you, all of you who are here, particularly until the last moment, and also all of you from the OIKONET group who, as I said yesterday, has been very supportive, very solidary with the enormous task of managing a project of this dimension. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much.